Good morning, afternoon, evening, or whatever time it is for you. Welcome back to AGTT, and today I'm going to bring to you some very important linguistic tips that have to do with the general demands. I fulfilled a video request last time that explained what the general demands were. Click on the top right corner if you haven't seen that video yet. But now I want to follow up with some tips on how to make the most of these demands. These tips are extremely important because you can use them every single shake and really take advantage of each turn you get. So, without any further ado, let's get into the tips. So my first tip for you guys is to not call color wild. Now you might be asking, why did they make color wild if I'm not supposed to call it? Well, you actually want your opponents to call it, not you. The whole point of your turn in LinguiSHTIK is to try to force your word or your sentence upon the other players, and color wild actually does the opposite. It makes more words available for people to use. Try to come up with a word with the cubes that you already have given to you when the game begins, and likely someone else will use their turn to call color wild for you. You then can use your turn to make a more dominating demand, such as number of letters or must contain. My second tip for you guys is to call must contain on rare letters. Now, if you were to call must contain on the letter E, for example, what's the chance that you would have invalidated someone's word compared to if you called must contain Q? Remember, the goal of these demands is to push your sentence or your word against your opponents and to try to eliminate their solutions. If you're calling must contain on E, which is the most common letter in the English alphabet, the chance that you eliminate your opponent's word won't be that high. I encourage you to call must contain on rarer letters such as J, Q, W, and Z. My third tip for you guys is to call must not contain on the vowels. This is kind of like the opposite of the previous tip. So if you were going to try to force your opponent to call must contain on the rare letters, you're going to want them to not use the common letters, and which are the vowels, A, E, I, O, and U. You want to call them on those common letters because there's a greater chance that they're already in your opponent's word and that then you'll eliminate their word if you call must not contain on one of those common letters. My fourth tip is to not call must contain on your word's first letter. If I were to ask you to think of some words with the letter K, what would you come up with? You'll probably come up with words like kitchen, kangaroo, or kale. Those are all words where K is the first letter. There's a psychological concept called the availability heuristic that explains why it's easier for people to think of words that begin with a certain letter rather than think of words with that letter in a different position of the word. So in LinguiSHTIK, call must contain on a letter that is not the first one on your word. So this way, it's less likely for your opponents to find your word. The fifth tip is that letter transfer is basically a combination of color wild and must not contain. Letter transfer is, to be honest, just a better version of these two demands. It gives you the power of must not contain because the letter you're transferring away from can't be used ever again. However, it also serves as a personal wild card because the letter you transfer to can be in your own word, which then helps you get closer to challenging now. If you make the most of your turn, you can potentially eliminate other players' words while getting one step closer to a challenge. And my final tip for you guys is to find words with either double consonant, double vowel, or both. If you find a word with these demands, you are, in a sense, setting up a protective shield around yourself. If anybody were to call double consonant or double vowel in an attempt to be offensive, you would be able to react quickly because you already have a word that fits those demands. If you have multiple words, some that have double vowel and some that don't, or some that have double consonant and some that don't, that's okay. You can have more than one word on the ready just in case one of your opponents calls a demand on you. You yourself can also call double vowel or double consonant in an attempt to be offensive as well. Just remember, the worst place you could be in Ling is in a position where you're just taking your turn, moving random cubes on the map because you don't have a word. You always want to be in a safe position in the game. Anyways, that's it for today's tips. I encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn notifications on. If there's somebody you know who would benefit off of these tricks, feel free to share the video to them. Finally, if you have a video request, email the address in the description below. Until next time, see you later.